A pretext is a purpose or a motive alleged or an appearance assumed in order to cloak the real intention or state of affairs.
Initial access. OMI is trying to get into your network.
Listen, this is your manager, and I'm trying to send off an email. I got this document. Need you to confirm a few details. So go ahead and log in and tell me what you think. I need this now, so to make this convenient, here is the link. I'm a threat actor, fishing mark. The email is urgent to distract you with it. So how fast you clicked it when you submitted the form with your password in it. You probably couldn't tell there was an actual difference in the URL. The domains look alike though. And to you it looked fine though, but mine had typos to make it look like yours. See, I was in the mood today to make your account a communal space. But then you activated your trap card, and I saw you had 2FA. But I just shrugged, I'ma shake it off. Got on kid gloves, I'ma take them off. Got your phone number, I'ma make a call. I'ma break this wall, it just makes me lol. I'm moving quick, I'm on a mission. Yeah, I heard your network is lit. I'm trying to get in. Yeah, I'm trying to get me a hit. When I go fishing. Yeah, you probably think it's legit. I got you clicking. Yeah. Hello. Hi. I'm calling you from the IT department. We have been under attack by some hackers, and we think that your account might be a target.
Oh no, how do I fix this?
No need to worry, I wrote up a ticket. You'll get a notification from your authenticator app, so please pass me them digits.
1 sec.
Okay.
Yeah. The code is 112345.
Thank you. You fell for the lie, so I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. Cutting it short like a crew cut. Probably think it won't happen to you, but it happened to Uber. They say you win some, you lose some. Boys got a smooth touch hacking you too, bruh. You know how I be creeping and I'm logging in your VPN. It probably looks anomalous. Some logs if you be keeping them. And probably unaware about the shares that have been peeping. And the reason I'll be seeking them, I'm looking for an easy win. You probably thought it was a magic trick, and you're mad you clicked. I'ma stack my chips and bet that a DA password is sitting in an admin script. I'm moving quick, I'm on a mission. Yeah, I heard your network is lit. I'm trying to get in. Yeah, I'm trying to get me a hit. When I go fishing. Yeah, you probably think it's legit. I got you clicking. I'm moving quick, I'm on a mission. Yeah, I heard your network is lit. I'm trying to get in. Yeah, I'm trying to get me a hit. When I go fishing. Yeah, you probably think it's legit. I got you clicking.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Generative AI in Azure. As always, I'm David Okiode, and I have with me here my co-hosts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kendi. So it's good to be back after a long while.
Yeah, it's been quite a long while, quite a long break that we've had. Quite a few things have changed since then. Yeah, Happy New Year. I think this is the first time that we're having this episode this year. So Happy New Year to the audience that's watching us. So thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, so anything that's caught your attention this year so far when it comes to AI in general, Kenny?
Okay, I saw recently that Azure AI Foundry is now available locally, just like anything local, and I think it's still in preview, but yeah.
Yeah, that's like a really like very interesting one, because there's a lot that many organizations will be looking to like do, I guess, edge cases where you're running some AI, workloads close to the edge, maybe due to network latency and other issues. So that's been a really big one. One that caught my attention. I'm not sure if you heard about like CloudBot, where it became OpenClaw. And then it's now called Moltbot. So yeah, so essentially what this is someone built this agentic tool that you can run locally on your PC, right? So you can run it locally on your PC. You can connect it to like your WhatsApp. You can connect it to Telegram. You can connect it to like other chats, like maybe applications that you're using on your mobile phone. And then you can give it instructions. And the orchestrator can communicate with multiple agents to do like the things that you want it to do. So for example, it has access to your emails, got access to the API for your fridge, got access to the API for the light for your house. And then you can chat with it and say, hey, can you do this? And it will figure out which agent it needs to communicate with, and it will do like all of that. The issue was this tool, it was created just like similar to like maybe I won't say like it's like pure hobby, but it came out of like being of an hobby, right? Somebody just was interested in something and they built it, and so it didn't really have like a lot of security guardrails. And some people started creating like malicious skills, so they call them skills. They started creating malicious skills. Other people were downloading those skills and installing them, and then very soon the agents were talking out to the internet. They had their own Reddit forum. They started their own religion. They had like about 40 prophets in their new religion. No human is allowed to join this new religion. So it's only agent to agent communication. So that was very interesting. Because then, it's like, hey, what's going on over here in this Reddit channel? These agents are starting their own religion now. They have like about 40 prophets. They're writing their own, they're writing their own book. And they've banned humans from joining. So that was a very, very interesting one. So, and by the way, like it just came out in the announcement that OpenAI and just hired the person that wrote that too. And
Really?
apparently, what they're looking to do now is to maybe create a maybe stronger version of that too, and then offer it out and stuff. So I guess we're gonna see that at some point. Okay. So that's really good. So audience, please just put in the chat window. I can see here we've got Harlan from Norway. Harlan, thanks very much for joining us. So let's get started with today's conversation. So today, Kenny, there's a few things that I was looking to just share today. And of course, you're going to be sharing with us the next time. But one of the things that I was looking to share today was around, we had the conversation in the past about MCP, right? Remember like the conversation that we had about MCP?
Yeah.
And what MCPs are, what they do. Do you remember, like from that conversation? I'm sure that you do, but from that conversation, what MCP is, and everything like that.
Yes, they are basically protocols or open standards for connecting models to external tools.
Awesome, exactly. So there are ways for us to connect models to external tools, and from like you can see the diagram that I'm showing on my screen. This sort of like showcases how, let's say, all MCP itself, how it works. So we have various components that makes up the MCP. So component number one is we have our MCP hosts. So the MCP hosts, you can sort of like think about it as the application that's running the MCP client, right? So that's the application that's running the MCP client. So that can be already built applications like, let's say if you're using Cursor, which is an IDE, if you're using Visual Studio Code, or you can actually build your own custom application that's using the MCP client. So that's the MCP host. And as we said, the MCP host is running the MCP client, which is the library that's responsible for making requests to an MCP server. And then what we have is we have the MCP server, which the MCP server can be running locally or it can be running remotely. If it's running locally, then the protocol that the MCP client can use to communicate with it, so it can just use a standard input output or standard IO input outputs to communicate with it if it's running locally. If it's running remotely, then that can go, over HTTPS, over streamable HTTPS. Right. So, and the MCP server is the one that manages the abstraction between, the external services, the web services, the database services, or any other service that we're exposing via the MCP. So that's the last thing that we discuss when it comes to like MCP. So, but what I want to discuss today is I want to cover something in Azure that's very interesting. Two things actually. So we'll see how we get on with time. So number one thing that I want to discuss, Kenny, is what happens if you have an existing API service. So maybe, Kenny, you work in an organization, they have an API service that exists already, right? They've built it for a long time. But then you want to take this API service, you want to make it available to an AI agent so that an AI agent can communicate with it. One of the ways for you to do that is to take your API service and then make it available as an MCP server. This process of making an API service available as an MCP server usually involves writing some form of code. So you have to write some form of code to make this work. But here's a very interesting thing. There is a service in Azure that if you're using, so there is a service in Azure called Azure API Management. If you're using this service in Azure, you can actually take a backend API service and expose it as an MCP server without having to write any code. So that's one of the benefits of this sort of like approach. So in this case, what we can do is we can take an API service, expose it as an MCP server without writing code. So that's the first thing that I want to show you today. It's a very interesting one, right, Kevin? So in terms of like what Microsoft are enabling here. So what I have here, I'm not sure, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Nice. Okay, so let me just make that a bit larger so the audience can also see. And also, audience, if you have any question, please feel free to put that in the chat window. So here, what I have here is I have an API management service. So an API management service is a service that we can use as an API gateway in Azure. We can expose APIs through this service. And what I have here, Ken, is if I go under APIs, I've exposed an API in this service. Now, this API that I've exposed is actually running on Azure App Service. So if I go under Azure App Services, I have this API running in Azure App Services. So it's actually a live API running on this service in the backend. So this is the API that's running, and I want to expose it as an MCP using API management and without writing any code. So that's the key point here. The key point here is that we can achieve this without writing any code. So let's go through this process and let's see how this works. So the first thing that I'll do is, let me go back here. Okay, so the first thing that I'll do is I'll go to on the MCP servers over here. And on the MCP servers, I can go to create an MCP server, and I can go to expose an API as an MCP server. So, and if I click on that option, it's going to give me a list of APIs I can choose to expose as an MCP server. So I can see any API that I have imported into API management. So that can be any API running on Azure App Service, any API running on Azure Function Hub, any API that I've imported as a Swagger file into API management. I'll be able to see the APIs on this list. So this is my backend API that I want to make available as an MCP server. So if I click on that API, and then it says, what operations do I want to enable? So what this one is asking me here, Kenny, is that my backend API service, I have different API operations. These API operations are the ones that I'm going to convert into MCP tools. So these are tools that will be available for my AI agent to use when my AI agent is calling, the MCP server later. So, but essentially the backend is, they're just API endpoint that I've exposed. So it's asking me here and it's saying, what API endpoint do you want to make available as MCP tools? So that's what it's asking me here. So all I just need to do is I just need to specify which API endpoints that I want to use. So I'll just specify a few. So let's say get IP, let's say get headers. Let's see, okay, get headers. Let's say that, let's say get status, and let's say get user agents. And if I want to, I can also expose, the post operations as MCP tools. So anyways, select the API operations that you want to expose as MCP tools, and then give your MCP server a name. So in this case, I'll just say HTTP bin MCP server. I can add it to a product in APIM, and then I create it. And it's as simple as that. So what I've just done is I've just taken an API without writing any code, and I've just made this API into a MCP server with MCP tools. So it has these tools that are available, but I've not written any code to make this happen. Isn't that cool, Kenny?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So now if you have an organization that says, oh, we've got like this API service, we're looking at how we can maybe do things in a more agentic way. So we can have agents that can call this API. Like, oh, okay, yeah, we can make that possible. We just need to take your API and make it available as MCP tools. Oh, do we need to write code for that? No, you don't need to write code for that. You can use APIM in Azure API Management Service, and expose that API as MCP tools. And then you have like all of these capabilities that you can use. The other advantage of doing something like this, Kenny, is that the API Management Service, in this case, can also serve as what is referred to as an AI gateway. So an AI gateway, that would be a service that abstracts client interactions from backend AI services. So for example, there may be a few things that we want to do. So I'll show you like an example of this. Let me bring this up on the screen. So to show you an example of what this looks like in terms of like an AI gateway. So let's see. Let me bring up something on the screen. And let's go this. Let's get some space. And let's paste this. So here is an example of some of the things that we can do. So if you have a look at this example here, we have the client that wants to communicate with AI services in the backend. That could be AI models, that could be AI data, that could be AI tools exposed as MCP. But instead of doing direct communication, instead of doing that, we put a gateway in the middle. Why would we want to do that? Number one, because of security. Then what we can do is that we can do some security checks here before the request is passed to the backend, right? Another advantage of that is because of resiliency. What do you think about resiliency? How does this architecture help us to do resiliency, Kenny? What do you think?
I don't know. Still trying to get an angle of it.
Yeah, so let me give you like an example. So what happens, let me give you like a scenario. So think about this scenario, Kenny. So look at this scenario. I have 2 instances of my AI models running in the backend, right? And I've got an AI agent that's calling the models. If this AI agent is communicating directly with this, what happens if, let's say, model 1 goes down? What's going to happen?
The other one takes over.
How will it take over? Because they are separate. They are not connected to each other. Right? Because it's not, because this one is hard coded. So this one, let's say this is HTTP 1 or HTTPS 1. This one is HTTPS 2. When we're configuring this one, we've hard coded and says you want to call a model, you call HTTPS 1. So that's what it knows. So if that goes down, then probably we need to go do some reconfiguration to say, I want to reconfigure you to talk to HTTPS 2. And that will require like some downtime, right? There'll be some downtime to that. But what happens is if we put something else in the middle, this will be HTTPS 3. And HTTPS 3 will be configured to load balance between 1 and 2. So that this one, instead of pointing to either 1 or 2, is pointing to 3. So it's always communicating to 3. If 1 goes down behind the scene, this won't even know about it. Because it's the job of 3 to make sure that you load balance across anyone that's available. So you can see the benefits there, right? That's how it helps us with resilience. So because now this takes over that job to make sure that any communication that needs to happen goes through it, and then it will make sure that if I have multiple instances in the backend, it can load balance between them. So that's what they're also referring to here. And when they said, traffic mediation and control. So it can mediate the traffic communication between the client and the backend services. Another advantage is observability. So observability is a very important one when it comes to consuming AI services, maybe using something like Microsoft Foundry. So observability means we want to be able to track all the interactions that's going on. If that is not centralized, if that is distributed, what we're doing is we're introducing complexity. It's sort of like a way, like let's say if, let's say, we've got like 100 children, little children, 100 little children in an open airfield. And, Kenny, you're meant to look after these 100 children. Make sure everyone is in order in an open airfield. I mean, what kind of challenge is that, right? That's going to be a challenge.
That's a big challenge. Yes.
Right? You got 100 children running everywhere. There's nothing that's containing them. So it's going to be difficult. However, if I take 100 children and I put them in a building where there's doors, you're in control of the door. You can open any door that you want at any time. You can close any door that you want at any time. Then it becomes a bit more manageable for you, right? That's what we're doing here. Instead of having 1,000 different AI services in the backend, everyone doing their own individual observability. We're not sure if A has done their own, if B has not done their own. So what we can do is we say, everybody, if anyone needs to communicate with you, it goes through here. And then we'll make sure that we have the necessary login, the necessary metrics, all enabled here. So someone asked the question in the chat window that said, wow, is this like another version of App Gateway in AI? Very good question. That's a very good question. So this is actually the same Microsoft AI gateway that has API gateway that has existed, API management. So API management is a service that has existed for a very long time. So it's an I keep saying AI. It's an API gateway service in Azure. However, what Microsoft are doing, or what Microsoft have done, is that they've added some AI native capabilities to API management service. So then they call that AI gateway. So AI gateway is not a separate service. It is API management with AI native management capabilities added to it. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so here's what I want to do, Kenny. So let's go test out the API that I just exposed as as an MCP tool here. So there's a very nice tool that I use whenever I'm testing APIs. I'm not sure if you've seen this tool before. It's a really, really nice tool. If you want to test anything API, this is a really, really nice tool to use. So it's called the, if you want to test anything like MCP, so the Model Context Protocol Inspector. Have you heard of that tool before?
No.
Yeah, it's a very nice tool. If so, what you can use this tool for, let's say you encounter a very interesting MCP that you want to test. This tool is a very good test tool. So usually you can run it locally. So in this case, I'm running it locally. And then it allows me to connect directly to API servers, to MCP servers, and I can do like some tests. So this is what it looks like. So you can see here, it gives me like a web page that's running locally on my PC. I can configure different MCP servers that I want to connect to, and then I can connect to it. So what I want to do is I want to try to connect to the MCP server that I just added right now. So I just added this. So let's go connect to it. So what I'll do is I'll get the URL to connect to this MCP server. No problems at all. And I'll put the URL here. It says, how do you want to communicate with that MCP server? I can use standard input output if it's local, or I can use streamable HTTP. In this case, I'll just use streamable HTTP. It says, how's that working? I'll say, yes, it's going through a proxy. And then what I can do is I can go to try to connect. And look at that, Kenny. I'm connected to my MCP server. It's showing as connected here, right? So I'm connected to my MCP server. And then if I want to exploit, I can go to click on list the tools. And you can see these are the tools that I just added right now. The API services that I added as tools, I can get to them here. And I can test them out. So for example, I click on that. I can run this tool. And it runs the tool and it gives me the response. So what is going on behind the scene here? Here is what is going on behind the scene, Kenny. What is going on behind the scene here is, again, we have a backend API service that our organization has. This is just pure API. We've now added it into APIM as an API. So we imported it as an API into APIM, and then we exposed it as an MCP server inside APIM. And now I've got an MCP client that I'm using, the MCP inspector that is communicating with the server, and then API management will translate that to the API, and then the API will send that to the backend. So that is what is going on behind the scene. But the good thing is this has been abstracted from me. I don't need to write any code to make this work. And this is where it gets interesting. All the different things that we're talking about, I can now start implementing them here. For example, let's say I want to implement authentication. I do not like how I'm able to connect to this MCP server without authenticating. I want you to always authenticate if you want to connect to this MCP server. Now that becomes easy for me to implement. So I'll go implement that right now. So if I go over to my MCP server in APIM, so all I just need to do is I just need to go modify the policy that this MCP server is using. So I've just gone here and I clicked on policies, and I can see the current policy that's added. So what I'll do is I'll modify this policy and I'll change it to a policy that has authentication. So let me go do that. So what I'll do is I'll replace this policy, and I've just added a policy there. And the policy that I've added here, what I'm saying is very simple. I won't go into details. So what I'm saying is allow this MCP client as an origin to communicate with this MCP server. So if I go over here, you see that my MCP client is running on localhost 6274. So I'm saying allow it as an origin. And, so this is cause, allow it to communicate. And then, however, if it needs to communicate, I need you to validate a JSON web token. It needs to be authenticated to Entra ID. before it's going to be allowed to authenticate. So that's all I've done here is I've just added a policy to say anytime a request is coming in, make sure that request is authenticated, make sure it is authorized before you allow it. And now if I save this policy, and then if I go back to MCP inspector, so let's go clear our current connection and disconnect. Now, if I try to reconnect again, let's see what will happen. So I've clicked on connect. Look at that. It says it failed to connect right there. Oh, sorry. I've got like a picture blocking that. So let me remove that. There you go. It says OAuth authentication failed. Now, again, I've not written any code. All I'm just doing is I'm just adding policies. And it says authentication failed. So in other words, in order for me to be able to connect to this MCP server now, I need to go configure some authentication, which is what I'll do. So I'll go configure authentication in with Azure AD. So I'll put authentication there. So let's put authorization. And what I'll do is I'll go add a token that I can use. So what I'll do is I'll bring up Azure Cloud Shell. I'll get a token. So I'll just get a token here, and then I'll try to use that token to connect to the MCP server. So we just give it a few minutes to load. And then once it's loaded, I'll get my token. So first of all, I need to log into Azure, make sure I'm authenticated. Let me switch that to Bash, by the way. Let's switch it to Bash. Let's log in. Okay, so I'll log in very quickly. Put in my credential, go ahead and log in. And that should sign me into Azure. So it's going to do like a bunch of stuff. So in this case, I'll just go select my subscription to clear the screen. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just get a token that I can use to authenticate. So I'll get a token and I'll move the screen so that people won't see my token. So I'll just run this command and that will give me a token to use. So I'll move it out of the way so I can connect to that without exposing my token. Okay, so I have my token at the moment. So what I'll do is I'll copy my token and I'll put my token here. So that's the token. I've put my token here and let's try to connect again. So if I go to connect and look at that, now it's connected. So again, I've not written any code anywhere. All I'm just doing is I'm using a service which is operating as the middleman or the middle lady, and the service is abstracting a backend API to the MCP client. So that's really like some information about this. Any questions at all, Kenny, with regards to this? I mean, do you understand why something like this? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I wanted to ask. You already talked about when to expose as an API as an MCP. About when not to expose.
So like when to expose is really, it's really if you want an agent, if you want to build an agent that can communicate with your API, right? So because what happens is that if you go to many organizations, they already have, API services everywhere, right? You go to like many banks, the way that they work is they have their services exposed as APIs, right? You go to many, maybe insurance companies, they have their services exposed as APIs already. But then what they may want to do is they may want to start experimenting where, let's see whether we can do something interesting with the services in an agentic way. But then sometimes the barrier is, now we have to go write code to turn that API into an MCP server, right? It's like, now we've got like this huge load that we have to do. So what this does is that it just abstracts that away from them. So, you have an existing API, you can convert it easily to an MCP server. So does that make sense? So essentially it's like,
Yep.
hey, if you want to communicate with, if you want to be able to expose it to an AI agent, then you can use something like this to do that. Okay, so by the way, let me just go back in the documents to show you where we started. So what we started from was, here is a representation of what MCP is and the different components that make up an MCP. But sometimes organizations have API services that they need to expose. And what we can do is we can use the Azure API Management Service to expose backend APIs as MCP servers without writing any code. There is another thing that I want to show you when it comes to MCP, Kenny, and I think I have the time to show that to you today. So which is, you've got, again, organizations with AI agents that want to be able to maybe interact with MCP services. Okay, I think we have some other questions in the chat window, so let's address those questions first. So there is a question here that says, when exposing an AI agent, where should the prompt protection be in this? Good question. So one of the job of using an AI gateway is that you can abstract security, right? So you can abstract security and you can implement security capabilities in the AI gateway. For example, let me give you an example to help to answer your question a bit more clearer. So as an example, if I go over to the service, if I go over to my API management service, if I go to where I'm importing the API, let's say in this case, let's say, okay, I go to like Microsoft Foundry and I want to expose, LLMs or models that I've deployed in Microsoft Foundry. I want to expose them via API management. So one of the things that I can do is here where it says set up AI content safety. I can actually set up content safety here that will help me to do text moderation, that can help me to do prompt injection checks, right? It can help me to do, keyword filtering before that gets to the backend model. So I can do that and I can abstract that to my AI gateway here. So that's one of the advantages. But that being said, when it comes to security, there is a principle called defense in depth. So Kenny, have you heard of that term before, defense in depth?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, okay. So let's explain what defense in depth means. Defense in depth means you cannot just rely on a single layer of protection. You have to have multiple layers of protection, right? So it's like maybe, you're at home or something, you're like, okay, yeah, I'll lock my door, I'll close the windows, right? I will lock, anything that I need to lock. But then at the same time, you grab your Bible and that becomes like your second level of protection. At the same time, you may probably want to get some weapons and there's another layer of protection. So you're like, okay, whichever level, we have multiple layers of protection here in case anything happens. So, and that's the same thing in the digital world. So we can't just rely and say, oh, just implement one protection and that's it. You want to, so answer your question, JT. So you have protection here at the edge. You also have protection at the backend service. So you combine multiple levels of protection. So that's how you approach that. You won't just go with one. So hopefully that answers your question, JT. And the other question that JT has is protection against dangerous prompt of unknown users. Yeah, so the same question. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So yes, you can have protection here on the AI gateway, but when it comes to security, you always want to have multiple layers of protection. Okay, the other aspect that I wanted to show you, Kenny, I think that maybe we can leave that till next time. Because the other part I want to show you is, let's say you have your AI agent in Microsoft Foundry. and you want to discover MCP tools that your agent can integrate with. There are different ways that you can approach this. When it comes to discovering MCP tools, you have public registries where you can get multiple MCP tools that are available. So they are available published on public registries. And I'll show you like some of them. So for example, here is a very common MCP registry that's out there. So if I go over here and I go to this, so here's a very common MCP registry, official MCP registry. So this is a registry that's backed by Microsoft, Anthropic, GitHub, and many other organizations. And I can search for the MCP for many services here. So for example, if I search for GitHub, and if I search for GitHub, I can see like multiple GitHub related MCPs over here, right? So, and I can look for whichever one, and then I can get access to that. So that's just one. But there are also other MCP registries that are public. So GitHub themselves have their own registry. So github.com/MCP. So here you get to the GitHub's MCP registry, where you can see a lot of MCP servers that they've published. So you can download them, you can install them, and then you can connect your AI agents to them. Your AI agents are running in Microsoft Foundry. So you can do all of that. So that's another popular one. Another popular one is Pulse MCP. So these are public MCP registries that you have here, where you can go again, you can click on different MCP. So this has about over 8,000 MCP servers, and you can discover MCP servers, download them, install them, and then maybe again integrate them with your AI agents in Microsoft Foundry. But here is one question for you, Kenny. The MCP server that we just exposed, that's running inside our organization, we just exposed it in APIM. Would you recommend that I publish that in a public registry? Would you?
Public, no.
Why? Any reason why you want me publish it public?
Anything in public is it can be threatened.
Yep, exactly. And also like anyone can access and install it and then maybe try to use it. And maybe this API is actually an internal API, so we don't want to do that. So what alternative do we have? The alternative that we have is that we can implement a private MCP registry in Azure. So what we can do is any MCPs that we're publishing in our organization that we're exposing, we can publish them to this registry. And then agents in our organization can retrieve them from this registry. Developers in our organizations can retrieve them from this registry. So that's like a private MCP registry. And there is a service in Azure that we can use to implement this. So I guess we'll see that next time. So the service is called API Centers. And in API Centers, what we can do is that we can create a private MCP registry, and then we can make that available in our organization. So I have an example here, but we'll pause from here, and I'll show that to you next time. So how we can create our own private MCP registry for use in our organization. Okay, any questions regarding what we talked about today, Kenny?
No, I still have to go and digest it.
Yeah, so speaking about digesting it, you are very lucky because guess what? I just wrote a series of hands-on labs that I'll be publishing very soon on this. So here, what you have is you have multiple hands-on lab relating to what I just showed you right now and more that you can follow. So the first one, just think about it as MCP 101. It walks you through what an MCP is, a component of an MCP, where you can find MCP servers, the public registries that I just shared with you, and then it walks you through the tool that I shared with you, the tool that you can use to test MCPs. So you can install that tool, and then test certain MCP servers to see how it works. So that's just like foundational stuff. And then after you've done that, then we go to hands-on number 2. And hands-on number 2 is where you build your own backend API, and then you expose it as an MCP tool in Azure. And then you connect to it and test it out to make sure that it's working. So that being said, so this would be very good ones that you can follow. So I've got MCP hands-on 1 and MCP hands-on 2. So all of them will be published on my Medium page very soon. And then you'll be able to get access to them. And then, you have access to an Azure account already. So you can just spin a few things up and then test it out to see how it works. And then if there's any questions, of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay, that will be it for today. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us. And yeah, so we'll stop here for today and then we'll pick it up from there next time. Have a lovely rest of the day.